Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Rob Kim, the LFS Career Strategist. I'm doing a cover letter webinar on for dietetics students, prospective dietetics students, I should say. And so really excited for you to join today. I'm going to say right off the top, cover letters to me are the most difficult things to do. They're very challenging. I think a lot of it is really this session today. I wish I could just tell you, like, this is the best way to write, and this is the best way to do engaging things. And that would mean that I have the secrets to writing, and that's not the case. So I do want to offer up that when I am working with students around cover letters, it is really hard. It's really hard. There's a many different layers for us in terms of like recognizing our story and so these things. So this session today is really a lot of ideas of how to approach writing, thinking about engagement, thinking about perspectives. And so I wish again that I could be like, hey, follow this template like 1, 2, 3. That's not really the case. It's really going to require a lot of you to just do a lot of practice drafting and not worry about being perfect right away. So we'll talk a little bit about that, prompts again to help with your writing block that might happen at times. So yeah, we've got a ton of ideas for you today. So before we proceed, I want to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. I am super excited actually to be doing a session like this with you. And I think about that opportunity, how we are connected by this land. I think that's a real privilege. And I hope all of you can take something away from today's session. I know that you are very busy and you're coming off a really challenging term. And so I do appreciate that you are here eager to learn. So again, the question I always like asking is, what can you put in your own basket to take home for today? And I think that's a nice way of, again, acknowledging the Musqueam people of our opportunity to learn on their land. So let's get right into it. I'm going to share a Google Doc with you, and you'll be able to interact and engage with me through that. And so I apologize in advance. I will be putting this into the chat a few times as people kind of join in. And if I forget to, you can put in the chat, say, hey, can you share that with me? I'm going to show a little bit of navigation with this document real quick, just for some of you. And so I'm going to share my screen. Give me one sec. Lots of people filtering in. Welcome, everybody. Again, if you're just joining, I'm going to put the Google Doc in the chat there, and I'm going to just show you a little bit of navigation here. So first things first, later on or right now, you can make a copy for yourself, but I would just like work off of this copy first because there's going to be some things that we're going to add in as well. If you look at this document outline, you'll be able to kind of jump quickly through this document today. And at the very end of this document, there's more, listen, there's more ideas than you need in here. My goal here is I'm actually summing up all these different strategies that I've been learning, been utilizing, and working with. And so again, this document will have all that. So again, at the end, don't worry, you can make a copy for yourself. And as you go through this document with me, just in case if you delete something, don't panic, just pause, and then hit undo and we can get back into it. I've given you the applicant package information today. And so that's hopefully something that you're going to be taking a look at as you go through. And so specifically, I would be looking at, so you don't have to keep on returning back to this, is for cover letter session today, is making sure you're taking a look at the technical requirements, right? So again, do you have the margins? Do you have the font size? Listen, all these things here, number 3 to 4 to 5, this criteria here, do not give the committee an excuse to kind of dock you for not following this structure, right? So again, please make sure that you take a look at this early and then as you proceed through, right? Doing a double check, because it's easy, right? That we've done it where we have instructions and we forget about certain things. So make sure you take a look at that. So I've included that link there for you. And then I'm going to go to our first opening activity here. And again, I'm going to put this, the Google Doc into the chat. If you can join me right now and just write down, oh, I just put down resume, my apologies. tell me what actions you've taken towards building your cover letter resume. For some of you, I know typically most people use their cover letter, like leave it to the last. So I do want to acknowledge that if you haven't done much, that's okay. So you can just put down, attending this webinar. I will take care of that number for everyone. So I'll take care of that participants. We have 22 people on this call, so you don't have to worry about doing that, but I'll give you 30 seconds or so. Pick the left and right sides there, try to balance it out, and just let me know, what have you done? What actions have you taken towards building your cover letter? And at this point, please, please, please just try to put one thing down. And if you haven't done much and you're like attending this webinar as my start, that's fine. That's fine too. I will say, I'm gonna just do one thing real quick, just in case you drop, because then you don't have to go through the survey again. So I'm gonna put in the chat right now, and hopefully you can copy and paste this. I don't know if you can copy and paste from the chat. I'll just try it anyway, and I'll put it into the Zoom there. I mean, in the Zoom chat. See if you can copy that hyperlink and have that saved for yourself, just in case you get dropped from here and need to come back in. Yeah, right now that application package that I showed you is for the undergrad one. And I will be honest with you, Adrian, I haven't actually sat down and looked at the M&D application yet. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of similarities, but I know there's a few differences. I haven't sat down with that one yet. I would assume there's a slightly different thing for that one, but I haven't checked. All right, let's see what we got here. Crafting my story, yeah. Thinking about my unique story, what I want to present, how I want to present myself. Wrote a draft. I think that's really good. Reviewing, reflecting on previous covers. You know what? I'm going to put a +1 down there for myself. I don't do that enough, actually. And so I think that's a nice thing to go through and look at some of your other letters that you've written. I think that even if it's not directly related to dietetics, that perspective is going to allow you to think about a little bit of like, oh, these are some stories maybe I didn't even think about bringing in or addressing or talking about. Yeah, doing the research on how to write one, that's part of this session here. I will again say it later on in this session that we're there, LinkedIn Learning has tons of stuff and approaches to cover letter. And there's, again, we have some templates again at students.ubc.ca/careers. So there's a lot of things out there. There's my previous sessions. I don't really like them, but I think I'm hard on myself. There's previous sessions that I did with the dietetics. I did a resume cover letter. I think that it's on YouTube. It's a pretty lengthy one, and that exists. So there's lots of different ways to do that research. So take a moment, put a +1 down if you are doing any of this, or again, generating some ideas for you. And again, in this session, if you attended yesterday, you're going to see that there's going to be some overlap in ideas, because for me, the resume can fuel my cover letter writing and vice versa. So it's really, this session is really just thinking about different approaches to writing, things that you could do differently that you haven't done, and not to be like, oh my goodness, I've never done that before, how am I going to do it? It's just like, hey, let's just try this out. And I find that's really helpful for all my different kind of writing practices. So I just want to note here, everybody, that the views expressed today, they're from my perspective as a career educator. I've been supporting prospective dietetic students now for, I think this is my 4th cycle doing this. So I've seen a lot. I almost feel like I could apply, probably wouldn't get in, but I almost feel like I could apply because I've seen these applications. I've read so many resumes, cover letters. So the strategies I'm sharing with you today, they're in no way endorsed by the UBC Dietetics program. They're pretty much my viewpoints, and I want to be very clear. I do not want you to leave this session saying, oh, I did this because Rob told me to, right? So I'll be very clear about that. These are, at the end of the day, they're just strategies. And like any strategy, there's positives and negatives to strategies. So really just considering, again, that you're trying to find some ideas that you can do to just do a better job in terms of building your application. So I just want to really state that. Now, the one thing I'm going to share with you today, and I totally forgot about that I made this for myself because I was thinking about how I can support all of you in this process, is this document here. And I'm going to email all the people who came to yesterday's session about this. It looks like this. So basically, again, please, you need to go over this and take a look at it, but I threw a template together. So if you look at, I use some tables, I have some comments in here. I even put the cover letter requirements in here. And so you might want to double check that. And I told you how to hide borders. So this is what your cover letter is going to look like, right? Your dietetics application number, I think the date, they want Dear Selection Committee, they want the sincerely the applicant, right? So those are fixed things. And that's one page there. And then on this one, and I have the right margins, it's a 1-inch margins on each side. And then I give you an example of, okay, here's your resume, relevant experience, again, using tables. I put in all the technical requirements in here in the middle. And then I've given you some examples of what some accomplishment statements might look like. Again, relevant experience. I have tons of information here, and then it gets to further relevant experience, extracurricular, academic. So this is one way that you can do that. So I just want to share that with all of you today. This is actually kind of, again, I made this a while ago and I haven't used it. So just for all of you today, happy holidays, early Christmas present, I guess. So please make sure you double check that. So some framing for today. And I used this framing in the previous session, but I think it's very, very important because I really think at this stage of the game, it's a real mental slog to do this. And so the real big question I want you to ask yourself, especially when it comes to cover letters. So when I work with people with cover letters in any industry, they usually start off with this idea of like, oh, I don't know what I have, or I don't have an interesting story, or I'm not unique. Those are really common things, and I think that all the time about myself. So really the question I want you to consider for today is, what do you need to feel safe about yourself? I'm going to say that again. What do you need to feel safe about yourself? I know that's a strange thing to ask, but again, really, I'm getting to the science of it. When you think about your brain, your amygdala, well, its base function is keep you safe, right? And you have fight or flight reactions. And so we really want our amygdala to prevent it from hijacking our entire brain, your higher level processing in your prefrontal cortex, like rational thought, creativity. Oh, that's what we need for cover letter, right? Making connections, just a lot of those level of thinking. If our amygdala is actually too worried about our survival and we're not feeling safe, it's very hard to access that. So what I mean by that, some of you might be at home like, I know I got a story, I want to write my cover letter, but you're having real difficulty. Fight or flight responses, typically flight responses are like you're frozen, you're procrastinating, you're just kind of stuck in place. You might have writer's block, right? So again, asking a question, what do I need to feel safe? And here are some ideas, right? Again, if you look at this list, some quick exercises, right? Hold our nose, blow out, speak low and slow and last, that calms us down. Exercising, sleeping, eating right, those sort of things. Imagining in details, and I love this one now. Imagining details, that's something you can practice all day long, which will really help your writing, right? And then naming your emotions specifically. I like to practice reframes. I like to do a lot of things like talking myself in third person. And so there's a whole bunch of ideas there for you to really sit down. Again, I'm sharing my practices, not for you to do it my way, just for you to understand what someone's writing process could look like. So when I'm developing a webinar, I like to sit down and I like to write one thing that I'm doing well, which is actually this activity, just to get my brain in a positive frame of mind. Or sometimes I have to say, like, I know I feel really nervous or scared about writing this, or I don't know if I can do it. And so I have to remind myself, like, no, I'm not useless. I have done things similar. It's just I'm feeling a lot of trepidation with this new story that I'm trying to do, or this is very important to me, these sort of things. All right. So really try to practice explicitly attending to your amygdala every day, every time you sit down to write. Okay, clearing your mind. So let's get into. I'm going to be using the metaphor of like thinking about your like a puzzle, and I think about actually your resume and your cover letter are actually bigger pieces of your puzzle, and how can they combine together to give a unique picture of you as a candidate for dietetics, right? So again, we're going to think about building those little pieces too, practicing what that looks like. And then also we got to think about how these puzzle pieces fit together, or also how we process and figure out how to organize these pieces. So let's get right into, there's going to be three kind of themes here. Thinking about who's the puzzle for. Number two is going back to creating your pieces. That's really just that, writing that. And I'll show you lots of different ways for writing prompts to happen. And then the last one is kind of visualizing that picture overall. What am I projecting to the committee? What am I capturing in my cover letter, right? Again, these are hard things to quantify, right? It's just me trying to work towards that, and it's difficult stuff. So let's start with, I'm going to break down a few things that I like doing and want to share with you today, and get you to maybe consider. So here's thinking about the intent engagement. So one thing you could do is you break down the application like a course syllabus. What are the learning objectives? What does the marking group want to read? Listen, when you actually adopt even metaphors or analogies, or take your learning from one area and apply it to an area of uncertainty. So let's say, okay, I know how to study. I've been in academics. How can I apply that process to this dietetics application process? That is a great way to learn. That's a great way to actually deal with uncertainty. So that is actually proven, a great method of learning. So that's what I'm really trying to do here, is like thinking about the ways you already look. So it could be recipes, it could be baking, it could be your personal interest. Like if you're a dancer, I don't care what it is, just apply those processes and think about how you can approach looking at what you need to do. So have you sat down with the application? Have you really gone through it? Are you, and then from that, are you really clarifying, okay, I believe this is what they're looking for, but I also believe this is who I am, and thinking about how you can then kind of combine those together, right? I really like thinking about the committee all the time, thinking about the committee. So I'm not just looking at myself and my story, I'm always putting myself in their shoes. That's really what this strategy is about. The other one I like to do is I keep asking, does this make sense? I should put that in quotes there. Does this make sense? Is this paragraph clear? Like I literally get that minute. So I will write, take a step back, and then I say, does this make sense? Is this paragraph clear? I'll give you lots of other questions in a bit as well. And then the other one you can do when you think about engagement is you play the delete distract game. What's the delete distract game? You could take a look at your intro, everyone. Take a look at your intro paragraph right now. And I bet you can most likely delete the first two sentences. Like we have a lot of placeholders that actually aren't contributing to our story. And that's engagement. So I think about, think about a movie. You don't want to start off with, hey, everybody, glad you're here for this movie. This movie is going to be about a superhero, and he's really neat. He likes helping people out, and he's very passionate about, being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to everyone. Like you wouldn't state that, and that would be a really, poor way to kind of engage that audience. So that intro paragraph, I often find that when I work with people, you could almost delete the first two sentences, first sentence for sure. And it's usually about the third sentence that you start engaging. So I like to play the delete distract game. It works like this. If you delete that sentence, that word, even the paragraph, does the overall cover letter lose its meaning? Most of the time it's like kind of like, yeah, it actually doesn't, or kind of doesn't. So if it's not like, if I delete this and it loses its meaning, then you're like, okay, then I know I'm more in the kind of like a storytelling kind of specific mode. So I'm going to say that again. A lot of people's dietetics cover letters will start with, I'm applying for da, 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 or I am so I'm interested in, or I've always had a, passion for dietetics or food nutrition and health. Those are really broad statements. And again, it'd be okay if you were only competing against one other person, right? Because then you're not going to see those same narratives. So sometimes even flipping the script for that, subverting things a little bit where they expect to see this intro and you change it. Now, I'm not saying I would maybe do something risky like that for something like this, but certainly you might want to start considering playing around. So the delete distract game often is a very nice tool to really push yourself your in terms of the intent and engagement there. All right, I'm going to be quiet and just let you take a look at these and just put down a +1. Some of them are questions, like just questions that you literally could write down for yourself and just go through and pick some things that you're like, oh yeah, I want to use that question. I want to, and I kind of put italics ones that I lean towards. And then as you go through this, you can even ask me just a few questions of like, okay, what does this mean? But I think pretty much most of them are straightforward. But these are, again, just like thinking about my process of cover letter, thinking about like just engagement. So I'm going to be quiet for a little bit and let you, and again, there's going to be overlap as we go through this webinar. I really tried to make distinct things, but I was like, oh, it was really hard because it's like storytelling. It's not discrete like resume can be. The whole point of this segment here is for you to find a new idea to be able to test immediately after this session. So hopefully you can copy and paste this into your calendar as an encouragement to you. And I'm always excited to see what you like. And some of you might want to start from the bottom of the document there. There's a whole bunch of other ideas down there. One approach for the ones at the more bottom is actually just organizing my stories and my research. I'm trying to get some facts and build up kind of like potential details that I can thread through my story as well. All right, a few more seconds. Hopefully one of these things stands out to you. I will also say, just a reminder again, that in a vacuum, when you're looking at your own cover letter and resume, uh, it's going to seem like, yeah, this is pretty good. And you also want to, again, remember that the engagement needs to kind of stand up where it's the 5th or 10th or 50th application that they're reading, right? So again, you know that there's about 100 to 120 applicants, and you know that there's going to be a lot of similarities. So again, how do you even just write a few unique details? Like you can still have similar things and still write some unique perspectives, a combination of perspectives to then have your story a little bit more engaging. And what I mean by that is, you can have a genre like a romantic comedy, that genre, but you could still have a script that is still engaging, that stands out. Like a producer's like, oh, we want to film this script, even though the romantic comedy genre, the beats, right? Somebody meets somebody, they break up, they get back together happily ever after. So the genre is food, nutrition, health. The genre is dietetics, right? But you can still build some unique stories and structures within that genre. I hope that analogy helps a little bit. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, I'm going to make sure I stick around at the end so you can even put them in a chat so I can go back to them. And that way you can have some specific questions answered. Let's get into this is the bulk again, and this overlaps with the resume webinar as well. And it's thinking about the ideating and writing. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. One of them is a repeat from the other session, but I think it's still a good one. My favorite one these days is the Simpsons writing draft method. And what this is if you actually go to the quote, he talks about just sitting down and writing the draft all the way, like writes out the entire script, doesn't worry about, is it good? Just puts it all down on page, even puts placeholders like, dialogue, jokes. Sometimes he would write stuff like insert joke here. And he then goes away and comes back and takes a look at the script. And I love it. It talks about like the hard part's been done. It's like someone snuck into his office, wrote all this bad stuff, and then I just have to take the job of actually rewriting it and moving things around. I really like that approach. And so often I do that with when I'm prepping my webinars, I just go, okay, let's just put it all down, and I just scrawl it all out, and then I come back to it a bit later, and then I just start cutting things out, rearranging, and it's almost liberating. And I know many of you, we get stuck with like what you're writing needs to be the thing that you're submitting. I mean, that's really tough. Like that's putting a lot of pressure on yourself. So in many ways, I just like doing this because I recognize it is just a iteration in a version, a really early version. And so I'm huge of getting things out of my head onto paper. I'm big at using Siri to actually send notes to my phone all the time. And I like to have these scraps of things around and then bring them together. That's again my personal approach, but it's one that's been very helpful in terms of just getting the writing done. I'm big on practicing using metaphors for your cover letter. Notice I'm using puzzles as a metaphor right now. You could use, in many ways, you can take interests of yours and use that as the metaphor, as a framework for your cover letter, for instance. So for example, let's say you're very passionate about Excel, which sounds really weird, right? But you could actually then use the actual terminology of Excel or certain points of Excel to actually organize your thoughts and convey those sort of, and that sounds really strange. And what I would do is I sometimes just like even taking my experience and writing metaphors, and I might not even use the metaphor, but by tweaking my perspectives, it really helps me with my writing process. So I really sit down a lot and think about metaphors. Now, a lot of people, when I say that idea, they're like, oh, I'm not good at it. And let's reframe it. Most of us don't actually practice the habit of using metaphors. So it's not that you're not good at it. You just haven't done it. So it's going to feel awkward, really awkward. But to me, a bad metaphor is still a valuable writing process, actually. And I always forget the scientist. I think it was like Aristotle, like actually use a lot of metaphors to try to make sense of these big things about the universe that he didn't understand. So again, we know, again, to help our brains to learn, using metaphors are a very powerful way. So if you want to, like, it could even be like, what's a metaphor to explain your career of how you got to want to apply to dietetics? And just doing that even in your head and then writing it out, you might not use it, but it's going to get your creative juices flowing. So metaphors to me are very powerful. Then the last one is another idea is the VSI table. I love that one. Again, where you're trying to establish your dietetics persona, and that persona again might not be explicitly written about, but hopefully it's being conveyed in your cover letter. So what I mean by that is all of you want to be dietitians, but hopefully you're conveying something specific that you want to do. And listen, you're going to change your mind. But I don't think it's necessarily going to help in your cover letter to be kind of like, oh, I'm open to anything, right? You almost want to hear someone like you're taking a position, and you can only take a position if you're informed, you know your research, or you have some experience, right? So if you're saying something like more specific, like I'm passionate about vitamin deficiency in children ages 5 to 10, and that's something that I want to be doing in dietetics, specifically through education and actually recipe development for children in low income family, like, those are like, then that persona hopefully is then reinforced by your resume, right? And it actually then amplifies that persona. Right. So that's one concept I sometimes think about. And, like, again, think about it's a story. Your cover letter is a story. It's not just repeating facts. I mean, you can do that, but that gets very kind of cold. I wouldn't necessarily put in a little bit of the emotional kind of storytelling necessarily, but I think I might lean to do that for this cover letter application, unlike maybe applying to some jobs, right? So if you again look at the application, as long as like the purpose of this cover letter is to showcase who you are and why you are a good candidate for the dietetics profession, right? So again, it's really showcasing that story, getting them to understand why you want to be part of that dietetics, or how you're going to be impacting communities, or how you're going to be this sort of dietitian. So again, that persona angle helps. So those are three things I think about. And then in this section here, there's tons. So I'm going to go just give you like accomplishment statements. Again, you might be like, well, isn't that redundant? I actually, again, like writing my accomplishment statements to kind of see for themes and seeing like, oh, this is kind of the person who I want to be. I've given you really an example, like here's a metaphor, like, if you're talking about like, again, data analytics, I'm applying to Microsoft, let's say, I might use very specific details. So that your audience, they're dietetics. So why not use language of, again, carbohydrates, nutrients, like get even very specific, like, kidney renal failure. I don't know what it is, right? But those terms and topics that you've learned, that by using that in a metaphor, what it can do sometimes, it actually conveys your level of expertise implicitly. To me, those are positive ways you can also impact your reader, right? So rather than saying, I studied all this in F&H, 200, let's say, you could actually say some of these details. And let's be honest, if you're not passionate about those specific details, who else would actually really write or talk about that? So those are some things that I'm trying to layer in. Doesn't mean it works all the time, all right? One other thing, again, STAR method, pause method from the other day. So to double dip, I like the problem, action, result. I might not actually use that in a paragraph. Sometimes I would though, maybe even my middle paragraph. So these are all ways that you can generate different approaches to writing. I'm thinking of how do I get ideas in my head, and that's why even at the end here, I love listening to podcasts about writers and comedians, because their approaches kind of fuel my approach in writing or gives me ideas. I think going for a walk, sleeping. I mean, that sounds weird, but you need a fresh brain. Like again, when you think about writers and you see the process, they have all different processes, but a lot of them talk about you need to sit down for lengthy amount of time. Like I actually would turn off my phone, turn off all my notifications. Why? Everybody, to do the higher level thinking that you need for writing, that deep thinking, you need time to get there and access. So if you're interrupted, that interrupts your flow a lot. So really think about chunking off time for that. That's what a lot of writers will talk about. So, and then my favorite again is thinking about specificity equals universality. Sometimes I can showcase specific details of my life, my experiences, which then connects to universal truths like everyone in dietetics, they want to help people, they like food, nutrition, health. Those are the universal truths of your audience and yourself. But yeah, you can still talk about specifics. That's really what storytelling is about. Okay, I'm going to be quiet and let you just peruse this list. And really it's trying to like, what are some ways I can, approach my writing process, or how can I generate more ideas? And notice I'm not saying good ideas, right? Just more ideas, which then allow you to hone in on some of those ideas that are really going to help you for your cover letter. Yeah, Lucy, no worries. Let me check that in there. No worries for being late. Glad you could make it. Some other weird ones I have tested out. I do like the meme version, how it started, how it's going. It's a nice way to think about your intro and your conclusion, right? Like this is how I kind of started to get into dietetics. You bridge the middle, and then the conclusion is like this is where I'm at, or this is where I'm going, right? Again, that allows you to have like a little bit of a theme going through your cover letter. Okay. My favorite current one right now is the VSI table, metaphors, and Simpson's writing method, which is why I put those at the top. Those are my personal, and I don't need them to be your favorite, but I just want to tell you that I am constantly trying to find just different ways to practice my writing strategies. And it's very helpful for, when I'm building my webinars and writing articles or posts, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, let's move on. Great. Number 3, visualize your unique picture. And I think this goes back to curation clarifying. So one way you can think about it is as you're writing and you're putting these pieces together, it's constantly taking a step back and looking at the big picture of the cover letter. So I think about like checking the weight of your cover letter. Like, is it too carbohydrate heavy? Like that meal might be like too rich for someone, right? So it's like, how can you maybe have some balance? Another technique I use a Post-it note. I actually write multiple Post-it notes. In this case, if I was doing a dietetics application, I would be writing that cover letter. I'd be writing down, showcase who you are and why you're a good candidate. I would have that as a Post-it. And then I would actually have 3 things that are showcasing my persona. Like maybe I write down like passionate about education and facilitation, real desire to impact children, and then want to collaborate and with communities to improve people's health conditions, right? So I might be adding those 3 things, having them cover letter, and just making sure that every sentence, every word that I'm writing, because I have 1 page to kind of make my case, is it connecting to those things. So I really like those. I have Post-its all the time too, because when you start writing, suddenly you're like, you might be writing some good stuff, but you're actually a little bit away from what you intended to write, because that's what happens. You're translating things from your head to a piece of paper. So sometimes that intent you might think it's there, but it's actually clearly not sometimes in the writing. So I really like that Post-it. And I just kind of said this again previously. My personal approach is I love just sitting all day thinking about my intro, thinking about my conclusion. And this is my personal opinion. And I think about storytelling is like people get hooked in by the intro and people remember the endings, right? Thinking about movie. The middles are important. And I know that I can build good stories from my resume, and thinking about that. Like the middle to me is actually easy to write once I have my intro and my conclusion. And I often do that again with my webinars. I start with like where I want to begin to where I want to end, and then think about the middle. In this case, if you notice again through both of the webinars, I just think about 3 things, and I use those 3 things to frame 3 more things, and then 3 more. So I really like, again, our brain works really well in 3s. And so that's a great way to maybe outline our drafts. Now, some people don't like doing outlines and drafts, but that's my approach again. What's my intro? And I obsess over that actually until I get something that kind of makes sense. And I love sometimes subverting expectations. Like, here's the intro, the audience expects us to end this way, and maybe slightly changes their perspective. So then the middle, I really believe, kind of writes itself after that. So that's one approach. Again, thinking about that. What I do want you to also consider is, what is that thread or theme running through your documents, right? That's where, again, you're trying to be a little bit more intentional. Otherwise, you're just taking puzzle pieces, and really good puzzle pieces, right? If you're working on these accomplishments and you're just cobbling together and you're just saying like, hey, ta-da, look at all this great stuff I'm doing. Well, that will be, again, me just taking all the best action, fights of every Marvel movie and just cobbling together. It's like, here you go. right? That's not storytelling, right? You need some of that emotional balance sometimes in there, maybe some humor. Humor's hard to do though, and I wouldn't do that actually for this application. I'd be very nervous to try something like that out. But again, maybe you want to, right? Again, it's like, how are you going to create this unique story about yourself? And that's sometimes in the ways that you approach how you structure. I will tell you that it's not your fault because we don't teach these things. Most cover letters will start off with a paragraph telling me who you are, how excited you are to get into dietetics, and then it goes into 1, 2, 3, I did this, this, and this, and it's just really expanding your resume. Like you're just taking bullets and writing sentences and putting in paragraphs, and then the last paragraph is some version of, as you can see, I believe I'm a really good applicant, or I'm excited to this, and I'm excited to hear more from you. Da, 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 da. Like that's probably what most people are going to do. So just by doing something different will actually stand out. That's one strategy. I'm not saying it's a good strategy, right? Strategies have pros and cons. Sometimes when you do specific storytelling, you're going to miss the mark, or it's going to be easier for your audience to reject you too. Ooh, I don't like that story, or that's not what we're looking for. That can happen. So I want to be very clear. To some of you, it's also what you need to feel safe. So if you're like, no, I really want to do kind of like really kind of standard, like my intention, supporting arguments, and then this is like, I want to meet that. I mean, that version will work in some cases too. I'm just going by this. Okay, it's about a 30% chance to get in. What can I do to maybe bump up my odds a little bit, right? Having that unique story. So again, it's just you really understanding what you're trying to do as a writer, not just doing what you think is good or what you heard. Can you understand what you're trying to do and then really commit to that as well? I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So just to wrap up here, this is one approach I would do. I would almost write out some truths, and they're not to scare me. It's just for me to like really understand what I'm trying to do. So I might do something like this, right? All applicants love food, nutrition, and health. All applicants go to UBC and RNF&H. All applicants are eager to get into dietetics. All applicants have relevant experience and are involved. Some have dietetics related experience. And listen, I'm talking from my own experience. I do not know how this committee makes any decisions because every single person that I read or meet, I'm like, I think you've done more than I have in my own life. Like all of you are really engaged, passionate about dietetics. And I mean, the fact that you're here a month in advance really tells you how invested you are in this process. So again, at the end of the day, I can only control what I can control. I'm doing this for thinking about if this is what everyone has, then what can I make sure I'm writing about that understands this, but then is still unique, right? So again, I'm just going to acknowledge that all applicants are preparing and working on their applications, right? They're all putting in the work like I am. All applicants have 1 page to tell their story, 2 pages of resume to further tell their story. Those are some truths that I might be working off of. And then I just say, okay, this is not to scare me. It's just acknowledgement. This is the situation. So if this is the situation, I either write more about this sort of stuff. And so I know a lot of you will start off like, I'm very passionate about food, nutrition, health. Great. I mean, let's try maybe be a bit more specific because this is what everyone's going to be writing, right? So again, let's just try to be a little bit more unique. And that's why I might go ask these questions instead. How can I write a cover letter that's unique to me, right? Notice I want to clarify. When I ask that question to people, they get really tense because because you're in your head all day, you don't think you're unique. And I think unique sometimes it means it has to be something big, like I literally solved, world hunger that level, right? Or it's super special. And no. You can have similar experiences and still find the unique angle and what you did. So what I mean by that is someone else on this call is passionate about education, but how you actually educate children is very different than me. That process, that's unique. Or the values that you have, like you and me both value education, but you might value a certain specific aspect of education. That's unique. So there's a combination of things you can do, right? Whether again is your values, skills, and interests, your experiences in there. And again, really sometimes owning some of these other unique experiences that your competition doesn't have. It is amazing to me year after year how many people cut out their extracurricular, like they've been involved in athletics at UBC, or they were a swim coach, or they were in a dance group. They worked at this specific, like, company over and over again. People leave out these big things that probably impacted you or made you who you are. That, I think that can be part of your story as well. And you don't need to share everything. You got to share the right details from that story that will convey your suitability for dietetics or make sense of why you want to go in dietetics, et cetera, et cetera. So don't be quick to check out stuff that is not in healthcare, right? We know that the application is asking for a wide, diverse range of experiences now, right? So again, to me, that's actually more unique because especially if you're like, well, I know a lot of people on this call are going to have, some experience with a dietitian, probably NutriKids, Roots on the Roof, or some cooking program. Like a lot of these things that you see are common or involved in LFSUS, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's where you want to bring out some of the maybe other experiences that other people wouldn't have or would be very rare. But the thing is, when it is unique like that, then you have to write a little bit more explicitly and carefully to make sure it still engages or makes sense to your reader, right? So you're talking in their language or from their viewpoint. So I think about, again, how can I avoid expanding my lines in my resume or just putting my accomplishment statements into a paragraph? And then I also ask the really hard question, so what? If I write in that paragraph, that sentence, so what? And then that lets me go back to my post-its or really think about my theme or what I'm trying to project, what my story, like, what do I want that reader to feel? Right? So that's a little bit. Now, I'm not saying I would do this, but I mean, this is just showing you the levels I would go to of like just acknowledging people, where people are at, what the commonalities you have, and then you can still work with the common themes. Like we all have this, great. So I just need to be more specific or unique or showcase something else that maybe a lot of people don't have. That's a strategy, right? So I just want to share that kind of approach. Okay, I'm going to let you look through here now, and there's a whole bunch of other questions that you're asking. I do the KISS method all the time. I keep it simple, silly. I really think about that all the time because my writing, it gets very convoluted, and I like to just reduce and think about that. And this is the other one, like state your intention directly. Often when I work with people, and you can do this yourself, just again, think about it in third person, look at your paragraph and just say, hey, Rob, what are you actually trying to say here? And then usually what your answer is sometimes better than what you wrote because it sort of says that. I find that helps me all the time. So that's another kind of strategy I employ. I'm going to be quiet and let's just kind of take a look and see some of these things that you want to maybe test out and use for yourself. I'm going to acknowledge one more time that writing cover letters is very difficult, but I'm going to reframe again and saying, actually, this whole process, whether I get into dietetics or not, I really get an opportunity to work on my story and to think about that. And that's actually going to be something that you're going to be able to carry forward for the rest of your career. And I really want to say again, that is going to give you an edge in any competitive process moving forward, because who else, I mean, again, working with prospective dietitians, who else right now is working on their story little by little, coming to a webinar on December 23rd, when you're very busy, you've gone through a lot. Who else is going to be working on these things little by little, using people's feedback, trying different things out in the next month? I mean, that can never be taken away from you. You have sophisticated job search strategies way beyond anything that I had at your age, and even probably even now, to be honest. Like I have never applied and worked on an application for like over a month, right? Those sort of ideas. So I want to just encourage all of you. The mental game needs to be strong, right? What do you need to feel safe? What is it about your story? And again, if you are struggling with your story, take a break. I always do this one. If it's a chore or a bore, like when you're writing, if it's a chore or a bore, just stop. Because if you are finding it boring at talking about yourself and writing your story, you need to go away and come back with a different angle. Because I really believe that's going to come out on the page, right? So really just try to find that motivation to stay engaged with all this stuff. And I hope, again, that you can just test out some of these ideas really quickly, really small. And don't worry about it not feeling right the first time, right? Like anything, your strategy, you have to try a few times before you reject it and say, that's not working for me. I've done it a few times. Let's find another idea. And so that's why my intent here is hopefully for you to come back to this document to get some ideas. But start small, identify hopefully 1 to 3 things today that you want to test out with your cover letter. And I really hope you have some fun. Actually think about, wow, this is kind of exciting. I'm rewarding myself for all the hard work I've done to this point. All of you have worked so hard to get here, right? Let's reward yourselves with capturing that story and being really excited to convey that to the dietetics committee. At the end of the day, you can have doubt and kind of like trepidation about, am I going to get in? You can hold that at the exact same time as saying to yourself, no, I know I belong, right? Like you can have those two conflicting things in yourself at the same time. And that's okay. Just as long as you're acknowledging that if you're too scared, you don't want that to overrun your confidence as well. You're trying to think about, again, very clearly where I'm at, what's the truth in both of these statements, right? So you all belong in there. And it's just we cannot accept everyone, unfortunately. And so it's just going to be every year, it's a different pool of candidates. And all you have to say is, I just put my best foot forward. I put my best story forward, and then the rest is out of my control. Listen, it's going to hurt if you don't get in. I understand that. But I don't want you to fixate on that end goal, because at the end of the day, even whatever persona you create here, I'm telling you, you can impact people that way in any community, company, position, etc. And it doesn't have to be through dietetics. And I'm telling you that as someone who, like, I love impacting people. I wanted to get into med school. I applied. I did not get in at UBC. And I think for 2 years, I just held that so much. It didn't help me. Like I held that so much of disappointment and what am I going to do now? And as if that getting in was indicative of who I am, and that wasn't fair to me at that time. And recognizing now that I'm helping people, just maybe not in the way that I expected, right? In medicine, I would have been maybe trying to save lives. In this one, I'm here trying to impact people in different ways and supporting you with your own career. So I just want to share that last bit with you, because I know what you're going to embark on is very challenging. And again, don't let that one destination dictate who you are and what you're going to be able to do for the rest of your career as well. All right, if you could do me one favor and just go to the very end here and just put in what's one takeaway from today's session. This is a really good practice. Again, I would actually do this at the end of the day of any writing, because it helps actually reconnect and build better neural pathways. It actually helps in your learning. Just even that one easy question. So take a moment to do that. And again, it's the writing. I hope you realize that don't be fixated on, I got to be exact with my words right now. Just get it out on the paper. I didn't really put this in there. A good practice is actually to write with pen and paper too. but I'm going to give you a second to just write down what's one takeaway from today's session. And then after, I will say two more things, and then I'll stick around for a little bit for any other questions for some of you as well. Thank you for these takeaways. They're really great. They're very encouraging to me. For me, at the end of the day, again, it's about, taking a couple strategies and just playing around with them. If I knew the best strategy to get into dietetics, I would just tell you at the top and save all of us this whole hour, right? It's really tricky. So again, just be a little bit courageous in trying out some new things. Don't get too stuck on, I can't do this, I don't know how to. It's more like, yeah, I've never done this before, right? Like if you've never snowboarded before, you don't go to the mountain the whole time saying, and if it doesn't go well, at the end of the day, you're like, yeah, it's because I've never done it. But when it comes to mental things, studying, writing, I don't know why we always, I mean, I do know why, but we always equate like our ability when that's not really fair. Like you haven't done it. So I just want to acknowledge that and really encourage all of you again. At the end of this document here, there's a ton of resources, again, shared from yesterday as well. The drop-in sessions, those are great things to use closer to the date where you can meet someone for half an hour to get them to take a look at your cover letter, resume. Those are great ways to tweak later on. Those appointments go up at 9 a.m. I know people reach out to me as well. I'm going to probably have a lot of half an hour slots leading up, but there's only one of me and a lot of you. So again, if you want to reach out with an email, you can do so with some specific dates for support. I will try my best, but I cannot guarantee that I'll have the capacity to meet all of you all the time. And then the webinar from yesterday, there's that document there. And then there's just a ton of stuff from yesterday too. Pause, star, those are great ways to start telling your story. And again, yeah, I'm going to stop the recording, and I just want to thank all of you for coming today, and I appreciate your time. I hope you got at least one thing from today's session.